Okay, so an object-oriented paradigm is really a copy of your class, right? Again, the class is the actual blueprint that allows a program allows you to generate an object, or instantiate is the term, an object out of the class. So even in JavaScript, even though it's not a pure object-oriented programming language, it does have the capability to create objects out of that as well. I'm pretty sure deep inside the engine itself, it's a class. Okay, otherwise it's not possible to create an object without a class. Okay, in the paradigm of object-oriented programming. So an object has pretty much two things. You have attributes. These are or properties, and right. So attributes and properties and methods. These are very common terms. And the syntax to create an object in JavaScript is like this here. Okay, you have to use the curly braces if you want to instantiate it this way. I should have put the other one here as well. There are two of them. And put the other one here so we can see object name2 is equal to new object. Okay, this is the other method. So either one of those will create an object. Okay, I should also put here that this is actually all optional. Maybe we should put that in here. Okay, you don't have to put anything in there. It could be an empty object like the dog right here. Okay, it's an empty object. Once you write this code, once it's run, then that object dog is created. It's empty, has no properties, has no methods. So in other words, no behavior until you attach some of those properties to it. Okay. This is the quickest way to do that. So here again is, once you created the object, okay, remember that an object is allows you to attach properties to it, whereas if you just use a variable name var a name or of something, and if it's not an object, then you cannot attach property directly to this like this, right? It won't work and it won't stick. Okay, it only applies to objects. So now, because dog is an existing object, I can now just say dog.name, and this one here, it just just come out of nowhere, just like you can just create that on the fly. Okay, once that being attached to the dog, then that object or that property is part of that object. Okay, so now has the dog.name will always be has the property, and then you can assign values to that as well, and what I do here. You can also attach a function to an object property as well. So let's just say bark is some type of function or behavior that dog does, right? The bark, and then you can put a function here saying that this dog, when I put dog.bark and I call it with the paren like down here, then it's going to run this function, and then whatever statements I have in here will be executed, right? So in this case, it's just going to put me an alert message, say wolf on the screen. Okay. And you have two ways to access these properties. Okay, this is, if you just look at this function here, right? You would say that that's in the anonymous function because it has no name. Okay, but once you attach that to something else, like this one here, we'll assign that to a variable name called bark or dog.bark. Then really, even though this one looks like the anonymous function, it does still have a name, right? The name is bark. So this is a little bit tricky here. It's not a how would you call this? It's almost like a semi or in between, but it does have a name. The name is called bark, right? Otherwise, I can still call it by doing this way. In here, it's optional to have a name. I could just say speak or something. That is still fine. It's still valid, but you cannot access this name. Because you assign this whole function to the bark, then you can access it directly through the bark only. Okay, so you can do that, but you don't have. You're not going to have access to that function name. So a true anonymous function is where you will put this function inside a parenthesis, like when you do you remember what we did? Something like this. These are just functions. Remember, like for example, btn, and then for btn that add event listener, right? I put here click, and then I put a function in here. Usually put, like, say, show message, and then this is a message function, and then you say false, right? So instead of put a function here, you write a function for that, but you could put a function name in here. As you can see, this one has no name, and then this will be the anonymous function. It's a true anonymous function. There's no way to reach that function. There's no name for it. You can't recall it at all, right? Only use it once. So in that sense, that is true. That's a true anonymous function. Okay, but once I replace that with a message, then it's no longer an anonymous. So I just want to point that out. So we have two ways to access these properties. You can use the dot notation, like this, right? The dot name dot bark, and then because bark is a variable, but it's a function over here. So really, when you access it, you have to put the parent here, just like a function call. And then I have up here as well, which I don't see. Do I have? No, I don't see it. So I could have another one like this down here. Maybe I could do something like, let me just add this to the list up here so that we have some data. If I say dog.info is equal that, okay, then we now have a dog info has some objects about the dog, and to access these information here, you just use again that notation. Dog.info.age will give me 5. Info.breed will give me pug, and so on. Okay, so you can use the dot notation. Or if you prefer, you can also use the bracket notation as well, just like the array. Okay, you just reference it using a string in here. The string is the key, even though if you look at age here, and the breed and the gender, right, these are the key, and as a JavaScript object, you don't have to put you don't have to put quotes around it. You can if you want. You can say age like this if you want. That's fine. Or you can take it out completely. That's okay too. Okay. The key value is the key name. It can take either form. But when you reference it, when you access it through the bracket notation, you have to put in double quotes or single quotes. Okay. Even though the breed and the gender here looks like a variable name, right? Otherwise it won't work. So you use the bracket notation. I could just put here just like the array, and if you look at this, this is really the associative array. Okay, so you look at this. This is like object. I put it here, but also the associative array. If you remember. We did that last time. So
are all these changes you're making going to stick with this?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, that's stick. And then you can also mix and match. You can use the dot notation in the bracket or the bracket dot notation in there. It doesn't really matter. Okay. So here I could use all bracket notation. Here I can use the bracket here into the dot for the age. Okay, so either way, it's very flexible, which is kind of interesting. So the other one here is pet. So up here, notice that when we create the dog, it's an empty object, right? And we attach each property manually this way, right? And then once you do that, then it will stick with the dog. This probably will stay with the dog object, okay, until you delete it. Or if you want to create it first before you access those, you can do this as well. Instead of the empty object, you can go ahead and give the keyed value pair. key value pair. And here information here, and this is again an object within an object, right? Anything that is in curly braces is an object. Okay. If I were to put this in square brackets, then that's an array. But array is also an object, right? Type. But the syntax will be a little bit different. So just notice that when you put a colon here instead of the equal sign, when you create objects, and if you define their properties this way, you can assign just a primitive data type. You can assign another object to a property, or you can assign a function to another property. Once you do that, this property here is the function. So when you call it, you have to reference the paren there, right? Okay. If you don't put the paren here, then what you'll get is you actually get the function definition. It'll return that whole thing for you, and it will not execute it. Okay. If you want to see that, if that's the point, then that's the point. Otherwise, you should put the paren there to make sure you call the function. And if you don't want to keep these properties anymore, you have to delete it. You issue the delete command and then the property name. Okay. Once you do that, then you have a you remove that from the dog or from this object. Okay. It doesn't exist anymore. One thing I want to mention though is this. Let me run this.
Does it stay in your code with the delete?
Yes. Yeah,
so
delete.
You still see it. It just doesn't. Just doesn't run.
You mean the property?
Yeah.
Now once you delete it, it's gone. Once you run the command delete dog and execute it, then
see, yeah. So it won't run in the script. Well, is it still in the?
It's not going to remove all instances of the method. When you put delete, is it going to remove it from the code? Does that make sense?
And if not, why would you do that?
Yeah, well, why would you do it? Maybe sometimes it uses a lot of memory. I don't know, right? You might have, and that's a simple one. You might have.
It might be easier to just write delete dog name and go back and try and change all.
Well, I mean, you do that during execution time, right? So you can do a code something like, if maybe you have a button somewhere, right? Say, do you want to keep this property or not? If it's yes, then keep it. Otherwise, no, then delete it. Okay. So once you delete it, and at runtime, it will delete that from your the property list of that object. But the initial code, of course, the hard code will still be there until you rerun it again. It comes back. But once you delete it, it's gone. So, for example, if I put that in here, just so we can see it, let me delete this, and we'll create a we'll call it here pet. Just say name. Okay. Not equal sign, it's the colon. So many different kinds. And then we have age is 10. It's an old dog. Okay, I save that and run this. Okay, so if I type in pet, you see that pet has that object, right? Of name, that and that. So these two properties are attached to the pet object. Now, if I were to say, so if I say pet.name, it gives me Fido. If I print pet.age, gives me that age value. Okay. If I go ahead and do like delete pet.name, okay, it returns true when it's deleted. So now if I go and type pet again, you see that it's no longer there. Okay, it removes from that list.
What if you try and call it specifically?
Yeah, so if you can go on pad.name, it'll say it's undefined. It's no longer there. Okay. Now, you might ask, like, okay, well, why can't I just do this? Like, I can add it back. Pad.name is, for example, if I type pad, it comes back again, right? So very, very simple. I mean, since you once you remove it, delete it, it has an undefined value. So, I mean, can't you just do this then? Pad name is undefined. Oh, wait, not that quote, but if you do that, then you would think that pad.name is undefined. But really, if you look at the tree, the object itself, the name is still there. Okay, so the property is still there. You just not assign a value. So if you want to remove completely, you have to use the delete. Okay, pad name. And the reason why you do that is maybe this is a really simple one. It could be that this could be a function call to another function, another big, huge data, and maybe you don't want to keep those data because it uses a lot of resources, right? So you just delete those. Okay, so that's that. Yeah, I already mentioned here. So just when you delete that one. Now that this keyword here, this is another one. We've seen this before, right? That this refers to the object itself, whatever that object is. And so if I create a new pad, so pad.bark, and then this refers to this pad dot name will be the variable here. Okay, if you notice this is a property of the pad, these are all these are properties of the pad. Inside this function here, I want to print out the dog's name, which is a part of itself, plus the word or the phrase here. Okay, if you want to use this name here, you have to use the keyword this dot the name. If you just put name, it's not going to find it. You just do that, okay, it doesn't work. Okay, so make sure you put the this in there, just to make sure you're calling itself its own name. If you want to grab the information.
Would you put pad dot name
in here?
Yeah.
Good question. What would happen if you do that?
I don't know.
Well, let's find out.
You'd be calling it from the.
Let's find out. That's a great question. So if I call that, put that here, let me turn this off and save that. Let's go to my refresh. Okay. So we'll type in pet. We get that information. As you can see, info is an object, right? So if you want to know what an object looks like, I have to go pad.info, and it tells me that it's another object of those information. So if you want to call the function pad.bark, then I will say pad.bark, and it gives you the message up here. Okay. Now let's go to Tom's question. If I put this as pet, I will put something else so we know that it works. Put two of them. Yeah.
No. If you're gonna do that, you gotta type whoopie.
Woofy. Oh, too late now. Okay, so pet is there. Pet.bark. Yes, does work. Good question. So I guess it's still be fine because the pet is still refers to this.
Right.
Okay.
So that's where I run into a lot of this.
Excellent.
I mean, why put this when you just put pet?
Yeah, it makes total sense. Well, the reason is because this is universal.
This is what?
Universal. You don't have to worry about the name of the function or the name of the parameter here, right? This is also very portable. I can change this to, what if I want to change this to something really complicated, right? So now you have to go and find the name and change that to that. But if you put this, then that's it, right? I'm not sure if this works, but you can do something like maybe, I don't know, T is this. If you do that, can you just put T here or something, right? Because you can also replace the this too, but maybe not in this example, but you can. If you don't want to type this. But great question, Tom. I would have give you extra credit for that, but
Man, please do.
you don't need it. You're doing good here.
No, you obviously didn't grade my test. I thought that's why you didn't talk to me Thursday.
Oh, no. All right, so that's that one. Now the constructor part. Okay, so constructor is, if you think about the object-oriented paradigm, like if you remember Java, right? You remember that you always have a class, and then that class you have a constructor. Okay, so this is exactly the same as that. It's called a constructed function, but really it's just a constructor. But in JavaScript, you don't have to create the class because it's automatically generated for you in the browser. Okay, so as soon as you create something, function call object here, and you can put param here if you want. If you don't, it's optional. Just think of a constructor in Java, and then you have to use this dot property equals value. That's the only thing you need to do. Okay, so here again, for example, and the reason why you do this, you use constructors is because you can create different objects using this template. This has become a template now, right? It's a template for you to build a lot of pet objects. So if you don't do this, then you have to do, if you want to use this we saw earlier, like this for pet, or if you want to use for dog, if this is dog, if you want another copy, well, you have to go and do this and then paste it, and you call it pet2. You can see how inefficient that can be, right? So instead of doing that, you just build a template, and then from that template just say pet1 is new pet, pet2 is new pet, and you get all these objects created using just that single template here. Okay, so the function name followed by the object name, and then any parameters you want to pass to the function. If it's not, you can leave it out. It's completely fine. And then the properties. Okay, this here is this one here. Info. This property info here is the data coming from the function here. And again, I have a same thing as before. Okay, a parameter here that is assigned to a function, and then it prints that out. So same thing. This name and this info, and then the info has data. So in this case, when I create a new cat of type pet, I'm calling this constructor here. I'm passing the first parameter as the name, the second parameter as an object. Okay, so that's an object down here. So if I want to access the age, which is this one here, then I would say this info dot age dot breed dot gender and so on. Okay, so that's all I wanted to cover in this example here. Any questions before we move on?
Is that cat bark supposed to be the alert from your function?
Yes, right. So when the cat dot bark, it's going to call this bark here, because cat is actually I made a mistake here. This should have been new here, sorry. Okay, it should be new pet, because I'm calling the constructor.
No, I was just looking at that. Wolf plus this name would be Wolf plus Fido run 5.
Yes, you're right.
So that would be.
Yes, thank you. Another bonus there.
I'm just trying to.
God, what's wrong with you today?
Don't believe
Your eye,
I spent in front
your eye of the tiger.
When I saw my grade on that test, I put my ass in front of the computer and pulled the fuck out.
Excellent, Tom. Yes, you're right.